Welcome back into the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wensel, and today we are talking 8 players that your league mates are overlooking in fantasy drafts right now. They did it with Christian Kirk last year. How did that work out for them? They did it with Ken Walker last year. How did that work out for them? Not well is the answer to both of those questions, and we're going to dive into 8 players that your league mates are overlooking this year and that you are going to take advantage of instead. Let's start with Amari Cooper, who goes off the board as a wide receiver 17. Now, I know exactly why your league mates are overlooking Amari Cooper. I'm losing my voice already. The reason why they're overlooking Amari Cooper right now is because he was the wide receiver 28 in PPR formats with Deshaun Watson in weeks 13 to 18 last year. Need I remind you, though, that Deshaun Watson was returning to play football after a year and a half of time off. A year and a half. He hasn't been working with any of those dudes since training camp that offseason. He was shaking off quite a bit of rust. He was trying to get in some sort of a groove, so I'm willing to chalk that one up to rust and getting in sync with the rest of his team. Now, even with all that, I think we can all agree Deshaun Watson is the better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett. I don't think that's a hot take whatsoever. Now, with that being said, listen to these numbers with Amari Cooper, who had 11 games with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback last year. His weighted opportunities, 65.4%. That was 9th best per Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. You can go check that out on their website, fantasylife.com. Go to their tools and go to their player stats. Check out the air yards. You can sort by weighted opportunities and see exactly what those weighted opportunities were. Amari Cooper was 9th amongst all wide receivers last year. He had a 38.3% air yard share. That was 7th. He had 1,765 air yards. That was 5th. 870 unrealized air yards. That was 3rd. That was with Jacoby Brissett. And there's been grumblings that Kevin Stefanski wants to actually throw the ball more this year, which makes sense considering, they're paying how many millions of dollars to have Deshaun Watson play quarterback for them. And Amari could easily finish ahead of any of the guys being drafted around him. Calvin Ridley, DK Metcalf, absolutely. T. Higgins, Devonta Smith. He finished ahead of all those guys except for Devonta Smith last year. He's just the least sexy name out of that list. So Amari Cooper is going after all those guys, though he could easily outperform any of them this year. So you get Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson with the full offseason together, fresh off a wide receiver 11 finish in PPR formats last year, and I think your league mates are just totally overlooking him as the wide receiver 17. He easily possesses top 12 upside again this year. Take advantage of it. Now, let's move on to running backs. Aaron Jones, he goes off the board as the running back 17. And just like Amari, I know exactly why your league mates are overlooking Aaron Jones. It's not hard to figure out. There's no more Aaron Rodgers, first and foremost. And the touchdowns have been on a steady decline. Aaron Jones exactly hasn't been the most steady asset in the fantasy football world. Now, I can't argue the Rodgers effect. Okay, that's just indisputable. But I can't counteract the touchdown argument, though, because those aren't the reasons you were in on Aaron Jones. Those are the reasons you were in on Aaron Jones when he was the running back 2, the running back 3, 3-4 years ago. But that's not why you're in on Aaron Jones now. You're in on him because he repeatedly earns targets and he's an incredibly efficient runner. Those are the reasons you're in on Aaron Jones. In terms of his receiving work, he hasn't seen less than 63 targets in each of the past 4 years. His 17-game pace in each of the past 4 years, he would have seen at least 68 targets in all 4 of those years. Targets are an earned stat. You do not just stumble in to 68 targets in a season. Targets are an earned stat. And for the lack of playmakers this team has, no Aaron Rodgers, no Devontae Adams, he was gone last year. Alan Lazard, if you count him as a playmaker. It's Christian Watson and Aaron Jones, okay? Matt LaFleur is going to find a way to get the ball in Aaron Jones's hands. Now, in terms of Aaron Jones's efficiency, he only had 213 totes last year, still totaled over 1,100 rushing yards, though. In 4 of his 6 years in the league, he's averaged at least 5.3 yards per carry. He's never fallen below 4.6 either. That's pretty efficient. That's pretty good. I like those metrics. And Jones has never been the workhorse. He's always thrived on efficiency and receiving work. He's never been this 275 tote guy. That's never been Aaron Jones. So I understand Jones is this boom bust-ish kind of player, right? But when he is on and when he is getting his touches, he can single-handedly win you your weeks. And he'll have spike weeks to stay in. He'll have plenty of those to stay inside our top 12 consensus. Don't ignore him. Don't ignore him. Don't overlook him like your league mates are going to, because Aaron Jones could have yet another top 12 season underneath his belt. Let's move on. Keenan Allen. He goes out the board as a wide receiver 19, and your league mates, your league mates are so silly for overlooking Keenan Allen. You know how I said Amari Cooper could finish ahead of Ridley, DK, Higgins, Devonta Smith, all those guys? Yeah, I think Keenan could finish ahead of all those guys as well. Easily. The $1 million question is, can he stay on the football field? Which is exactly why your league mates are going to overlook him, but you're not going to, because from week 11 on last year, when Keenan Allen was finally healthy, he was the wide receiver 3 overall in PPR formats. The wide receiver 3 overall. Don't overlook him. He drew the second most targets during that span. He had the most receptions. He had the 5th most receiving yards. He was averaging 18.8 fantasy points per game. Now, I know Mike Williams will be back healthy this year. They spent first-round draft capital on Quentin Johnston. I get it. And I'm not calling Keenan Allen a top 5 fantasy wide receiver this year, but just think with me for a moment. Justin Herbert threw the ball 699 times last year. That was the second most in the frickin' league. There's plenty of volume to go around. Kellen Moore is now the offensive coordinator. During his time in Dallas, 2nd in total offense, 2nd in scoring, 4th in passing offense. The Chargers, they have a serious chance to explode on offense this year, and I will gladly be ahead of the curve on all of their weapons, and especially the crafty vet, Keenan Allen, who Justin Herbert trusts the most. Do not overlook him, because your league mates are going to. They're going to be too panicked about injury, and they're going to miss out on a potential top 12 wide receiver. All right, let's start. Let's get to a few unsexy names here. Miles Sanders going to a polar opposite situation in Carolina than he was in with the Eagles. I'm not convinced it's all bad for him, though, right? The good from Philadelphia, we can point that out, right? Last year, he was 8th in carries. He was 5th in rushing yards, 11 total touchdowns, which was 9th after 0 the year prior. And he was 4th in red zone touches last year as well with 49. So that's the good that's coming from Philly. And the good that's going into Carolina, Deuce Staley has already said he believes Miles Sanders can be a 3-down back. He's already said they want to get him involved in the receiving game more, which is great for PPR formats. And realistically, when you look at Miles Sanders in relation to all the other weapons in this offense, in terms of it being an offensive threat, where would you rank Miles Sanders? Adam Thielen? He's aging. He's less explosive. DJ Chark? I would say Miles Sanders is better. Jonathan Mingo? He's exciting, young, but incredibly unproven. A lot more trust with Miles Sanders there, the proven vet. So I actually think there's a really large opportunity here for Miles Sanders to take on a big role in this offense and be a strong safety valve for Bryce Young to check down to. So again, Sanders is not the sexy name whatsoever, but your league mates are going to overlook him solely for the fact that he's on the Carolina Panthers. Nothing good comes from the Carolina Panthers. They're going to suck. Miles Sanders is going to suck. That's just bad fantasy football strategy when Miles Sanders could be in for a career high in touches this year, and I 100% mean that. He could be in for a career high in touches this year. Another unsexy name, Christian Kirk, goes off the board as a wide receiver 27. Your league mates are too hot and bothered by a wide receiver that hasn't played football in a season and a half. They're too hot and bothered by a wide receiver that hasn't played football in a year and a half to overlook these two things, okay? Christian Kirk was a wide receiver 12 last year. The wide receiver 12. They're overlooking that. And the other thing they're overlooking is that these dudes play 2 totally different roles on offense, okay? I'm not saying Kirk is going to be a top 12 wide receiver again this year. And I am not saying Calvin Ridley will be a total bust. But let me read you the names of players Christian Kirk is going after. DJ Moore. I like Justin Fields for fantasy. I don't like him as an NFL quarterback. I would gladly take Christian Kirk ahead of DJ Moore. Terry McLaurin, he's in the far worse offense. I understand the debate, but I would take Christian Kirk ahead of Terry McLaurin. Mike Williams, can he stay on the football field? DeAndre Hopkins, yeah, I don't hate that. Drake London, Desmond Ridder is throwing him the football. Incredibly unproven. You have Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson there too. Christian Watson. Jordan Love's throwing him the football. I have no clue what Christian Watson's going to be this year. I know what Christian Kirk is, though. Christian Kirk's a borderline top 20 wide receiver this year. Now, in terms of Ridley eating into Kirk's volume, I don't want to just ignore that because I think obviously he will, but I guess it retracts a lot more from both Zay Jones and Evan Ingram than it does Christian Kirk. You look at where these two line up in the formation. This tells you a lot already. Ridley ran 553 routes in 2022, and only 65 of them, only 65 came from the slot. Christian Kirk ran 518 routes last year. You want to guess how many came from the slot? 494. That was third most in the league. Can you tell which one of them plays on the perimeter and which one of them plays in the slot? I don't think you'll be able to guess. But maybe the best thing about Christian Kirk, though, right, is that he gets it done at every level as a slot wide receiver. He was 12th in deep targets, 5th in red zone targets last year, and now those red zone target numbers will likely come down. But we're talking about a guy at the wide receiver 27 who could easily finish top 20 again this year and actually flourish alongside Calvin Ridley. With Trevor Lawrence entering his third year into the league, there is still room for Trevor Lawrence to improve. That's the really scary thing. There's room for Trevor Lawrence to improve still. And he's going into his third year in the league. He's going to be one of the best offenses in the league this year. I am absolutely loving Calvin Ridley, and your league mates can gladly keep overlooking him so you can keep getting him at a value. All right, here we go. This is my favorite one. Alvin Kamara, running back 29. He goes out the board currently, and I understand it. But so not only are your league mates overlooking this player, they're chickens as well. They're 100% chicken. You can't play scared of fantasy football. Scared money don't make money. They're scared of a potential 6-game suspension for Alvin Kamara. Now, do I think it's likely going to happen? Yeah, but there's plenty of rumors swirling around right now that it might be 2 to 4 games. Nick Underhill, great beat reporter for the New Orleans Saints, said he'd take the under on 6 games for Alvin Kamara. Just something to keep in mind. There's talk of it only being 2 to 4 games. And not the 6 games anticipated. Maybe even 0 games. What? At this point, as the running back 29, that's totally worth it on Alvin Kamara. That's totally worth it. The running back 29, despite being the running back 13 in fantasy points per game last year, Kamara, 1st in snap share, 4th in opportunity share, 7th in weighted opportunities, top 12 in carries, targets, receptions, and receiving yards. He was 6th in yards per route run. He was 3rd in target share. This dude was getting fed. They were letting this man feast last year, getting him all the touches he could get. Now, it wasn't very efficient. And, well, the Saints went out and they signed Jamal Williams. They drafted Kendre Miller. But what if? What if the Saints want to take the load off of Kamara? Just a bit to increase his efficiency and productivity. What if? Kamara didn't hit 200 rushing attempts until 2021, which was his 5th year in the league. That's when Kamara was at his best those first 4 years. The running back 3, the running back 4, the running back 9, the overall running back 1. Now, that was when Kamara was younger, sure, but what if? What if Kamara doesn't have to shoulder the load of the Saints offense and they increase his productivity by using him more effectively, more to his skill set, and not just shoving him in the middle of the A-gap all the time? Because that's not what Kamara does best. He doesn't work best when you just throw him into the A-gap. We know Kamara has top 15 upside this year. And if all you're doing is waiting for the suspension to drop, you're being a chicken. That's playing scared. Scared money don't make money. Quit overlooking Alvin Kamara because he has top 15 upside this year. And if the Saints start to take the workload off of him, guess what? They're going to start using him in more productive ways, which is going to lead to a top 15 finish for Alvin Kamara. I am all of a sudden very back in on Alvin Kamara for 2023. All right, let's keep it moving here. Marquise Brown. Now, your friends don't like Marquise Brown for the same reason they don't like Miles Sanders. It's because his team sucks, right? But you want to know what hasn't changed for Marquise Brown? His team still sucks. The Cardinals were 4-13 last year. Like that doesn't change. I hate that argument. Oh, the Cardinals could be so bad. Yeah. And Marquise Brown was still pretty good last year. What has changed, though, DeAndre Hopkins gone. He's a Titan. Cliff Kingsbury also out of town, and Kyler's going to miss the first chunk of the season. So D-Hop leaving town, probably the best thing we could have asked for Hollywood. In weeks 1 through 6 without D-Hop, he was the wide receiver 5 overall, averaging 18.3 fantasy points per game. He was 4th in targets, 7th in yards, scored 3 touchdowns during that stretch. And now Kyler being gone isn't great, but let's not act like Hollywood isn't going to see ridiculous volume. He saw 8+ targets in all but 3 active games last year, And if the Cardinals are playing from behind, they're going to be throwing a crap ton, right? Marquise Brown is going to get his volume. He can get it done at all 3 levels. He can beat defenders downfield. He can get shifty on the inside. He'll be the primary weapon for a team that desperately needs to generate offense. So just because these dudes are on bad teams does not mean they're going to be bad for fantasy football. Marquise Brown's situation is going to lead to just lots and lots of disgusting volume. We're not going to want to watch him on Sunday, but he'll get plenty of volume, and you'll look at your fantasy box score, and all of a sudden you'll see Marquise Brown puts up 14 points. You'll be like, how in the world did he do that? That'll be Marquise Brown this year. Your league mates are totally overlooking him as the wide receiver 31 right now. All right, last but not least, we're gonna get real nasty. We're going to get real nasty for this last player and talk about another Chargers weapon, Gerald Everett. How about that for a name? He's going to be super easy for your league mates to overlook because nobody cares about tight ends outside of the top 12 to 13. If you throw Dalton Kincaid in there as the tight end 13. But I do. I care about these tight ends. I care about them. Let me remind you of where Gerald Everett finished amongst all tight ends last year. He was the tight end 13. It wasn't pretty, but he gave you a handful of top 10 weeks. Let me remind you of who the Chargers offensive coordinator is. Kellen Moore. Let me remind you of who Kellen Moore's tight end was in the Dallas Cowboys offense. Dalton Schultz. Let me remind you of Dalton Schultz's success with Kellen Moore. He was the tight end 10 in 15 games last year. He was the tight end 3 in 2021. He was the tight end 11 in 2020. Now, there are more viable weapons in the Chargers offense than there were on the Cowboys, sure. However, what's stopping Kellen Moore from making Gerald Everett his next Dalton Schultz? You may not get a top 7 tight end with your last pick in the draft, but Gerald Everett sneaky has tight end 1 upside this year, like weekly starter upside this year. And your league mates will just remember him as the inconsistent option in 2022 instead of putting all these pieces together and swinging for upside at the tight end position if you punt. That wraps out 8 players that your league mates are overlooking in fantasy football this year. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, hey, make sure you do that. We're releasing videos every single day, and you'll turn on those notifications too, right? That way you know new episodes are coming out every single day. I keep my word. Thank you so much for tuning into this video on the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel, fellasdraftguide.com. If you want our draft guide to dominate your fantasy leagues this year, make sure you get your copy $10 or use code FELLAS on Underdog Fantasy. They will match your first deposit up to $100, and we will gift you that draft guide for free. Again, thanks for tuning into this video. You can follow me on Twitter at Lucas Wenzel, and we will see you all again this week. Deuces.